Espresso, the foundation of almost every coffee drink in the world and the place where the whole story starts. It's a highly concentrated shot made by forcing hot water through finely ground coffee beans at high pressure. The result is small, dense, and dark, with a thin layer of golden foam sitting on top called crema. The word espresso is Italian and roughly means pressed out, which is exactly what's happening inside the machine. Water is pushed through the grounds at around 9 bars of pressure, and the whole extraction takes about 25 to 30 seconds. Too fast and it's weak and sour. Too slow and it's bitter and over-extracted. The grind size, the water temperature, the pressure, the freshness of the beans, the tamping force, and the skill of whoever is making it all matter. A good espresso is a small thing that takes a lot of precision to get right. Americano. The Americano is espresso with hot water added to it. That's the whole thing. It tastes similar to drip coffee, but has a slightly different character because the espresso was brewed under pressure before the water was added. The origin story is that American soldiers stationed in Italy during World War II found the local espresso too intense and started diluting it with hot water to approximate the drip coffee they had back home. Italian baristas started calling it an Americano, and the name stuck. The espresso is brewed first, then the hot water goes on top, which preserves the crema and keeps the flavor in better shape than if you did it the other way around. Cappuccino. Equal parts espresso, steamed milk, and milk foam, usually served in a small ceramic cup. The name comes from the Capuchin friars, a Catholic religious order whose brown robes were said to match the color of the drink. Others say the name refers to the hood the friars wore, and the foam on top of the cappuccino looks like the shape of it. Either way, the name has been attached to this drink since at least the early 20th century in Italy. A traditional Italian cappuccino is a morning-only drink. The thinking is that the high milk content is too heavy for the stomach later in the day, and Italians genuinely stick to this. You order a cappuccino at 3 in the afternoon in Rome, and the barista may give you a look. Latte. A latte takes that same espresso base and adds a lot more steamed milk to it, usually 3 to 4 parts milk to 1 part espresso, with just a thin layer of foam on top. The name comes from the Italian cafe latte, which simply means coffee with milk. It's the mildest of the major espresso drinks, which is why it became so popular globally. The milk smooths out the bitterness and makes the drink easy to drink quickly or sip slowly. Latte art, the rosettes and leaf patterns that baristas pour into the foam, came out of the specialty coffee movement in Seattle in the 1980s. It started as a way for skilled baristas to demonstrate their milk steaming technique and became a signature of third-wave coffee culture worldwide. Flat white. A flat white looks almost identical to a small latte, and the two get confused constantly, but there's a meaningful difference. A flat white uses the same amount of espresso, but significantly less milk, which means the coffee flavor is much more pronounced. The milk is steamed to a velvety, almost silky consistency, with barely any foam at all, which is where the flat part of the name comes from. It originated in either Australia or New Zealand in the 1980s, and both countries have claimed credit for it so many times that no one has ever fully resolved the debate. It became a global drink when Starbucks added it to their menu in 2015 and introduced it to a massive audience that had never encountered it before. It sits right between a latte and a straight espresso in terms of strength. Mocha. A mocha is essentially a latte with chocolate added. Chocolate syrup or cocoa powder gets mixed into the espresso before the milk is added, so the result tastes like a cross between coffee and hot chocolate. The name has nothing to do with the flavoring. It actually comes from the port city of Mocha in Yemen, which was one of the most important hubs in the global coffee trade for centuries. Yemeni coffee from that region had a natural, faintly chocolatey flavor, and the name eventually became associated with the combination. The Dutch later smuggled coffee plants out of Yemen to Java, Indonesia, which produced the world's first commercial blend, Mocha Java. That blend balanced the bright acidity of Yemeni beans with the earthy body of Javanese coffee. The modern mocha has no real connection to any of that history anymore, but the name traveled forward with the flavor association intact. Gibraltar. The Gibraltar, which most of the world calls a cortado, is a shot of espresso with just enough steamed milk to cut the acidity and soften the edges. The ratio is usually about 1 part espresso to 1 part milk, served in a small glass. It's stronger than a latte and gentler than a straight espresso. The Gibraltar name specifically comes from the Libby Gibraltar glass it's traditionally served in, a squat, thick-walled tumbler that became popular at Blue Bottle Coffee in San Francisco in the early 2000s. The drink became a favorite among people who actually want to taste the coffee but find a straight shot a little too sharp. You drink it quickly. The small format is part of the point. Cafe cubano. The Cafe Cubano is a small, intensely sweet espresso shot that originated in Cuba and became deeply embedded in Miami's Cuban community. What separates it from a regular espresso is the espuma, a thick, pale foam on top, made not from milk, but from sugar. The very first drops of the espresso shot are caught and whipped together with sugar until they turn into a dense, creamy paste. Then the rest of the shot pours over it. The result is extremely strong and extremely sweet, and the sweetness is built into the structure of the drink from the beginning, rather than stirred in afterward. The drink is common throughout Miami's Little Havana neighborhood, where it's served in tiny paper cups through takeout windows and consumed standing on the sidewalk. Café Bombón. Café Bombón originated in Valencia, Spain, and is popular across the country and through parts of Southeast Asia. It's made with equal parts espresso and sweetened condensed milk, served in a small glass so you can see both layers clearly before you stir it. The condensed milk is denser than the espresso, so it sinks to the bottom. And the visual contrast between the dark coffee on top and the thick white layer below is part of what makes it distinctive. The name bonbon means candy or sweet treat in Spanish. It is very much closer to a dessert than a morning coffee. A nearly identical drink called kopi susu is popular in Malaysia and Singapore, made the same way but typically using local Robusta coffee, which is stronger and carries a slightly more bitter edge. Affogato. The affogato is one of those drinks that sits directly on the border between a coffee and a dessert and refuses to choose a side. It's a scoop of vanilla gelato or ice cream with a fresh hot shot of espresso poured directly over it. The word affogato means drowned in Italian, and that is exactly what happens. The hot espresso begins melting the cold ice cream immediately, and you get a few spoonfuls where the two are still distinct before they merge into something that tastes like a very cold coffee milkshake. It's traditionally served in Italy after meals. Modern versions use hazelnut or chocolate gelato, and some add a splash of liquor like amaretto or frangelico, which pushes it even further into dessert territory. Turkish coffee. Turkish coffee is one of the oldest brewing methods still in widespread daily use today. Very finely ground coffee, almost a powder, is simmered directly in a small long-handled pot called a kezve, along with water and often sugar. There is no filter. The grounds settle to the bottom of the cup on their own, and you stop drinking before you reach them. The coffee houses of Istanbul in the 1500s were among the first in the world, and coffee culture as a social institution arguably started there. The ritual around Turkish coffee has always been as important as the drink itself. When you finish, you can flip the cup upside down onto the saucer, let the grounds dry, and someone will read your fortune from the patterns they leave behind. Arabic coffee. Arabic coffee, known as kahwa, is brewed differently from Turkish coffee, even though both come from the same broader regional tradition. It uses lightly roasted Arabica beans, which gives it a paler, more golden color, and is heavily spiced with cardamom. It's brewed in a dallah, a tall curved pot with a long spout, and served in small handleless cups called finjan. It's almost always served without sugar. The drink is deeply tied to hospitality across the Arabian Peninsula. Offering someone kahwa is a gesture of welcome, and refusing it can be considered rude. UNESCO added it to its intangible cultural heritage list in 2015. The origin traces back to Greater Yemen and the same port of Mocha that gave its name to everything else. Ethiopian buna. Ethiopia is considered the birthplace of coffee. The legend traces the discovery back to a goat herder named Kaldi, who noticed his animals acting strange and energetic after eating berries from a particular tree. Whether or not that story is true, Ethiopia is where Coffea arabica grows wild, and its people have been drinking it longer than almost anyone else on Earth. The Ethiopian coffee ceremony, called buna, is a deeply symbolic event that can last several hours. Green coffee beans are roasted over an open flame until they're dark and fragrant, then ground by hand and brewed in a clay pot called a jabina. The coffee is served in 3 rounds, each one progressively weaker than the last. The first round, called abel, is the strongest and is meant for pleasure. The second, tona, is for reflection. The third, baraka, which means blessing, is believed to bring good fortune. You don't just drink buna, you sit with it. Café de olla. Café de olla means coffee from the pot, and it's a traditional Mexican brewing method that predates modern coffee makers by centuries. Ground coffee is simmered in a clay pot along with cinnamon sticks and piloncillo, which is an unrefined brown sugar with a deep molasses-like flavor. The clay itself adds a subtle earthy quality to the drink that you simply cannot replicate in a metal or glass vessel. It's a common morning drink across Mexico and particularly associated with the Day of the Dead celebrations and the Christmas season. The cinnamon and piloncillo make it naturally sweet and warming, and nothing extra needs to be added. It tastes like the most grounded and honest version of spiced coffee imaginable. Cafe tuba. Cafe tuba is the most consumed beverage in Senegal and is considered a sacred drink within the Mouride Brotherhood, a large Islamic Sufi order founded there in the late 1800s. It is brewed with coffee and a West African spice called salim pepper, also known as grains of salim, and sometimes cloves are added as well. The combination produces a warm, spiced, slightly medicinal flavor, unlike anything else in the coffee world. The drink is named after the holy city of Touba in Senegal and is closely tied to the teachings of the Brotherhood's founder, Cheikh Amadou Bamba. Street vendors called talibé sell it from thermoses on street corners throughout Dakar, pouring it into small cups for a few coins. For many Senegalese people, drinking Cafe Touba is both a daily habit and a spiritual act at the same time. Vietnamese egg coffee. Vietnamese egg coffee was invented in Hanoi in 1946, during a period when fresh milk was scarce and hard to come by. A bartender at the Sofitel Legend Metropole Hotel named Nguyen Van Giang began whipping egg yolks together with sugar and condensed milk to create a substitute for the dairy he couldn't source. He then spooned the thick, creamy foam over a cup of strong Vietnamese coffee. The resulting drink has a dense custard-like consistency and is commonly described as liquid tiramisu. The recipe became so popular that Jiang eventually left the hotel and opened his own cafe, Jiang Cafe, which is still operated by his family in Hanoi today. The coffee itself sits underneath the foam layer and you drink the two together, letting the custard fold into the bitterness of the espresso as you go. Scandinavian egg coffee. This is an entirely different drink that happens to share the word egg. It's a brewing method popular in Sweden, Norway, and among Scandinavian immigrant communities in the American Midwest, where it spread in the 19th century and is still served at church gatherings and community events today. A raw egg, sometimes including the crushed shell, is mixed directly into the dry coffee grounds before brewing. During cooking, the egg proteins bind to the bitter compounds and oils in the coffee, then coagulate into a clump that floats to the top and carries most of the bitterness with it. What's left behind is a clear, smooth, remarkably mild cup of coffee. People who try it for the first time are almost always surprised by how clean and light it tastes. Finnish cafeost. Cafeost means coffee cheese, and the Sami people of northern Finland and Sweden have been drinking this for centuries. A mild, squeaky cheese called leipä is cut into cubes and placed directly into a cup of hot coffee. The cheese doesn't melt. It absorbs the coffee, softens slightly, and takes on its flavor. You drink the coffee first, then eat the softened cheese cubes with a spoon. The texture is similar to halloumi or fresh cheese curds. To anyone who hasn't encountered it before, the combination sounds wrong. But the flavor is subtle and the cheese ends up tasting faintly of coffee in a way that many people find unexpectedly good. Cold brew. Cold brew is made by steeping ground coffee in cold water for anywhere between 12 and 24 hours. No heat is ever involved. Because heat is what extracts the bitter and acidic compounds from coffee, removing it from the process entirely produces a drink that is naturally smoother and sweeter tasting without anything added. It is not the same as iced coffee, which is just hot coffee poured over ice and results in a diluted, more acidic drink. Cold brew became commercially popular in the United States around 2015 and spread into the global market from there very quickly. It also keeps well. A batch in the refrigerator stays good for up to 2 weeks, which made it attractive to coffee companies that wanted to sell ready-to-drink products at scale. Nitro cold brew. Nitro cold brew is regular cold brew that has been infused with nitrogen gas and poured from a tap exactly like a draft beer. The nitrogen bubbles are far smaller than carbon dioxide bubbles, which creates a thick, creamy texture and a dense, foamy head without any dairy at all. It looks like a Guinness in a glass. Starbucks launched Nitro Cold Brew across their stores in 2016, and the format took off almost immediately. One of the more counterintuitive things about it is that nitrogen affects taste perception in a way that makes the coffee register as sweeter than regular cold brew, even though nothing has been added. It's almost always served without ice because ice would dilute the texture that the whole drink is built around. Mazagran. Mazagran is widely considered the original iced coffee, and it goes back to 1840s Algeria. French soldiers stationed near a fort called Mazagran ran low on milk and started drinking their coffee cold and black, sometimes with a little water or sugar mixed in. They brought the habit back to France when they returned, and cafes started serving it. The drink evolved differently in different countries over time. In Portugal today, Mazagran is typically espresso served over ice with lemon juice and sometimes a splash of sparkling water. The result tastes nothing like any other coffee drink. It's sharp and refreshing, somewhere between a coffee and a lemonade, and works better in summer heat than almost anything else with the word coffee attached to it. Greek frappe. The Greek frappe was invented entirely by accident in 1957 at a trade fair in Thessaloniki when a Nescafe representative named Dimitrios Vakandios couldn't find hot water during a break. He mixed instant coffee with cold water in a shaker and discovered the thick, light brown foam it produced. He poured it over ice and tried it. It worked. The drink became the defining coffee of Greece almost immediately, spreading through cafes and beach towns and becoming synonymous with long Greek summers. The frappe is made from instant coffee, water, and sometimes sugar, shaken or blended until the foam forms, then poured over ice and topped with cold water or milk. It is intensely popular in Greece to this day, and attempting to introduce it elsewhere has never produced the same cultural attachment. Macchiato. The word macchiato means stained or marked in Italian, and the drink is named for what it looks like. A traditional espresso macchiato is a shot of espresso with just a small mark of foamed milk on top, barely enough to register as a milk drink at all. It was developed to distinguish a barista's milk-added shot from a plain espresso when multiple drinks were lined up on a bar. The stain made it easy to tell apart. The modern version that many coffee chains sell under the name macchiato is a very different thing. It's often a tall, layered drink with steamed milk, flavored syrup, and a drizzle of caramel, bearing almost no resemblance to what the word originally described. Ristretto. A ristretto is a shorter, more concentrated version of an espresso. The same amount of coffee is used, but only about half the water is pushed through it, which means the extraction stops before many of the harsher compounds have a chance to dissolve. The result is sweeter and more intensely flavored than a standard espresso, with less bitterness and a thicker body. The word means restricted in Italian. Some coffee people consider it the purest expression of what a coffee bean can produce. Double ristretto shots are used as the base for some specialty drinks, particularly in the Australian and New Zealand coffee scene where extraction precision is taken seriously. In the end, the story of coffee doesn't belong to any one country or any one method. It started as a wild plant in the forests of Ethiopia. It became currency, ritual, and politics in the Ottoman Empire. It bankrolled colonial economies across 3 continents. It started revolutions in the coffee houses of London and Paris. And somewhere along the way, in cities from Hanoi to Havana to Helsinki, it became the quiet, organizing force of daily life. Every culture that encountered it found a way to make it their own, and the version they made tells you something specific about who they are. The Cubans built sweetness into the structure of the shot. The Vietnamese replaced the missing milk with egg yolk and turned it into something good. The Senegalese made it sacred. The Australians argued about who invented the flat white for 40 years. And the rest of the world just kept drinking, finding new ways to pull something different out of the same small brown bean that a goat herder in Ethiopia reportedly noticed one afternoon a very long time ago.